Aloha, aloha, ohana. And good afternoon, welcome back to Aulani, welcome to Hawaii, Kalohe Valley. My name is Uncle Aito, he, him, his. I'm one of the caretakers here at Aulani. Which means most of the time I go around, I change light bulbs, I trim hedges, I mow lawns, stuff like that. But one of the perks of my job, when Auntie deems fit to let me out, I get to come out here, tell some stories, share a little bit of the culture of Hawaii, and sing ever so slightly off key. Now the song I just sang, that's a song called the Aulani Hula, a very special song for us here at Aulani. And I'm gonna offer up a mo'olelo. I'm gonna share a story with everybody out here this afternoon. This is one of my favorite stories to tell out here because this is a story about something you have probably seen. This is a story about the Menehune. And the Menehune, if you do not know already, they're a race of small people, kind of diminutive little fellows. And they have lived here in Hawaii even before the arrival of the ancient Hawaiians. These days, they mostly keep to themselves. They tend to live up in the mountains, far away from everybody. They only come out at night as they like to be seen by people like you and me. The Menehune are known to be, they're very secretive. Legend has it that there are 300 Menehune scattered all throughout the grounds here in Aulani. I always say it that way, legend has it, because nobody knows for sure exactly how many there are. And they're all over the place. If you've been up to Maka'ala, up to our lobby, you probably see them hanging on the quarter. Maybe you've been in an elevator and seen one up in the quarter, spider Menehune style. If you go over to the Menehune Bridge, it's a very good chance you'll see Menehune over there. It's a good reason to call it the Menehune Bridge. And these little guys, they have a reputation for being very mischievous, or as we say in Hawaiian, kolohe. They're known to wreak havoc, to play tricks on people. But in addition to that, they're also known to be very industrious. They love to build stuff. They're famous for building loko ia, or fish ponds. They build big river dams, all kinds of things. Mischievous, but also industrious. Also, the Menehune have an interesting law that states that any project they undertake must be completed before the sun rises, before the first rooster crows in the morning. So luckily these little guys work very hard, they work very well together, and all these little hands working in unison, they can make a quick job out of anything that they do. Mischievous, industrious, hardworking. The Menehune are all these things in this story, which is good because the story is about them. But this is also a story about a va'a. Now va'a, that is how you say canoe in Hawaii. And canoes come in all different shapes and sizes. You get a huge double-hulled va'akalua, these double-hulled voyaging canoes that would sail far distances between the islands. You get smaller canoes, good for like a 6-man canoe paddling team, or even smaller va'a, just right for one single person to go out fishing, to provide for their own ohana, their own family. And there's once a village where everybody had one of these one-person-sized canoes, or everybody except for one person. And that person's name was Laka. And Laka didn't have his own va'a, but he really, really, really wanted one. The problem was, back in the days of old, you couldn't just go down the street to your local buy and large and get a canoe. You had to build it yourself. And Laka, he didn't know how to build a canoe. But from what he'd seen of everybody in the village, he knew you needed to start with a good tree. And the tree is pretty much your whole canoe. The tree you pick has got to be nice and thick. It's got to be nice and tall, nice and straight. And even if you pick a tree that seems great, you got to make sure that tree is strong enough. And the way that you check for strength when it comes to trees is you wait for a little bird. A little forest bird called the elepaio. And the elepaio is a helper to canoe builders. Because if you're checking out a tree and you see the elepaio land in it and start pecking at it, then you know that tree is poho. It's no good. The elepaio is having a feast on all the bugs in that tree is rotten, it's not strong enough. But if the elepaio lands in the tree, and instead of pecking at it, the bird sings out its song, caw, caw, caw. Yeah, which technically is not what an elepaio sounds like at all. Well, then you know the tree is strong and good to use. Well, Laka didn't know any of that. All he knew is he wanted a canoe. So one day he made his way up into the mountains, up to the forest they're in, up to find a good tree. And Laka wandered around and he found many trees because it was a forest. And finally he found a tree that seemed to be good. This tree was nice and tall. But unfortunately for Laka, it was very, very crooked. Well, he wasn't the smartest guy around. He took a look at the tree. He thought, seems to be good. And so he took out his ko'i, his stone adze, and he went to work chopping that tree down. And after a lot of chopping, finally that crooked tree went poof and was felled. But this time it's starting to get dark. And Laka thought, oh, I'm pretty tired. Maybe I'll leave the log and come back to work on it in the morning. And he made his way down off the mountain to his village below to spend the night. But little did he realize the forest he'd found up in the mountains was also home to, guess what? A band of Menehune. And they were watching him go about his work, and they talked amongst themselves. They said, hey, you see this guy? He doesn't know what he's doing, yeah? He doesn't know how to build a va'a. I mean, look, the tree he picked is all crooked. He's just gonna waste the wood. You know what? We should teach him a lesson. And so those Kolohe Menehune huddled together and came up with a plan. And in the morning, Laka once more made his way up into the mountains, up to where his crooked log should be. But where the log should be, there was nothing. And where the stump of the tree should sit stood a rather tall, if somewhat crooked tree. Confused, Laka thought, maybe I got lost. Maybe I just got turned around up here in the woods. And he decided to find himself another tree. He wandered around, he found many trees, because it was still a forest. And finally, he found a tree that seemed to be good. This tree was nice and straight, but unfortunately for Laka, it was rather short. I know it gets shorter every time I tell the story. Anyway, as I said, Laka, not the smartest guy around, he took a look at the tiny tree. He thought, seems to be good. And once again, he took out his koi, and once again, he went to work, chopping that tree down. And after a lot of chopping, finally, that little tree went and was felled. But this time, it's starting to get dark again. And Laka thought, oh man, I'm even more tired than I was yesterday. Maybe I'll just leave the log, but I don't want to lose it. So that night before he left, Laka triangulated his coordinates, marking the spot where the log had been felled, and then he made his way down off the mountain to spend the night. And in the morning, once again, he made his way up into the mountains, up to where his log should be. He checked his coordinates. This was the spot. But where the log should be, there was nothing. And where the stump of the tree should sit, there instead stood a rather petite, if still somewhat cute, little tiny tree. Confused, befuddled, one might say, Laka was too frustrated to do any more work. So he made his way down off the mountain. And that night, he did the smartest thing he could think of. That night, he spoke to the kupuna, to the elders of his village. And together they came up with a plan of their own. And in the morning, with a renewed sense of purpose, he once again made his way up into the mountains, up to the forest, up to find a good tree. He wandered around, he found many trees because it was still a forest. Except this time he found a really good tree. This tree was nice and thick, nice and tall, nice and straight. As he stood there admiring it, that little forest bird, the elder paw swooped in, laid in its branches and sang out its song. Yeah, I know that's not what the elder paw sounds like either. This was indeed the perfect tree. But this time, before taking out his koi, Laka instead took out his o'o, his digging stick. And he went to work digging a hole right where the log would be felled. After a lot of digging, the hole was ready. So once again, he took out his koi. Except this time, following the advice of the kupuna, the elders, he offered up a oli, a chant. He asked the forest for permission to take this most perfect of trees before finally going to work, chopping that tree down. And after a lot of chopping, finally, that perfect tree went and was felled. Well, Laka didn't waste any time at all. He climbed into that hole he dug, hiding himself there in the darkness, in the shadow of the trunk and branches of the tree, waiting to find out what had been becoming of the logs he'd cut. And as he sat there in his hiding place, he could hear voices above. And the voices said, oh, yeah, and the tree began to rise up away from the hole. Laka jumped from his hiding place, and he saw the Menehune scramble about. He quickly ran over. He snatched up the Ali'i, the chief of the Menehune, by his ankle. And as he held him dangling upside down, Laka spoke to him. He said, "Why are you doing this to me? All my hard work for nothing. Come on already, man." The Ali'i, the chief of the Menehune, looked up at Laka and said, "Bruh, you for real? You don't even know how to build a va'a. I mean, look, took you 3 tries before you even found a good tree. I tell you what, let's make a deal. You let me go, and me and my friends will build you a va'a. We even bring it down off the mountain to the beach. All you gotta do is build one halau va'a, one house for your canoe." Sounds good. Did sound pretty good. Laka was pretty tired, been a busy few days. He chopped down 1, 2, 3 trees, dug a hole with his stick, hiked up and down the mountain so many times. And he still had no idea how to build a canoe. So Laka agreed. Sent the chief of the Menehune on his way home as he made his way down off the mountain to go to work building that halau. Now the halau, literally the canoe house, the shape of it is quite familiar to us here at Aulani. As you can see, it reflected the tops of each of our towers. Those high vaulted ceilings coming to that arching A shape, just perfect for you to slide your canoe into for protection from the elements. It was hard work to build the halau, but not as hard as building a canoe if you do not know how to build a canoe. And as Laka finished, he thought, I wonder if the Menehune are playing another trick on me. So once again, he made his way up into the mountains, up to where his perfect log should be. But where the log should be, there was nothing but the hole he dug. And where the stump of the tree should sit, well, this time all that was left was in fact a tree stump. Confused, befuddled, stumped, you might say, Laka made his way down off the mountain. And as he approached the halau there on the beach, he could hear sounds coming from inside. The sounds of ulu leaves being used to smooth the sides of the hull. The sounds of oil being used to seal the wood. The sounds of pieces being lashed together, the aqua, the alma, the outer. And he thought, better leave it alone. Made his way back to his own house to spend the night. And in the morning, as the sun peeked up over the horizon, Locke returned to the beach to find there in his halau the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen in his life. Oh, the va'a was gorgeous. It was perfection. It was like the Lightning McQueen of canoes. It was pretty sweet. And as the sun climbed higher and higher in the sky, the rest of the village turned out to admire Locke's new canoe and to admire the craftiness of the hands that had made it. But only Locke himself knew the only craftiness his own hands possessed was the ability to snatch up one chief of the Men of Hunei. Eamako, we are the Men of Hunei. Eamako, we live up in the mountains. Eamako, we work until the dawn. Then we're gone, then we're gone, then we're gone. Weehaw. Well, mahalo nui ohana. Thank you so much for letting me join you here in Waikolohe Valley. There will be more mo'olelo. There'll be more storytelling out here later on this evening at 7:30 and 8:30, which is, of course, later. But right now, I gotta go change more light bulbs, yeah? So until we meet again, ahui ho akuno. Have a wonderful afternoon. Mahalo.